So we're going grocery shopping today. We're walking down the aisles at Aldi, which, by the way, you don't have Aldi in Oregon. You are
Oh, I had Aldi
missing
in
out.
Ireland, and it was
It's the best.
phenomenal.
I love Aldi. It's
It was
cheap
so
and
good.
it's good. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. Anyway, so we're walking down the aisles in Aldi, and we get down the specialty aisle, right? The stuff that comes and goes, and I
Isn't
keep
that
hearing
more or less everything at Aldi?
no. It's like they got two aisles of stuff. There's like the non-food stuffs that are specialty, and then the specialty food stuffs.
Oh, okay.
That stuff switches, and then mostly everything else stays the same. Anyway, so I'm walking down, and I hear come out of the shelves this laughing, right? And I get closer, and I can see through the shelf that it's not a child on the other side that's laughing. It's not a person. And as I look around, turns out the pasta was laughing.
I'm sorry.
Get it?
Okay, giggly pot. Okay, so this can't be our cold open.
For those of you who aren't watching, I held up a picture of specially selected gourmet giggly 3-color pasta.
That's Cameron.
I love it.
on.
I love it. You're the fourth person I've told that joke to.
I would say subjected is the verb there.
Subjective. I sent it to Parker and my brother, and in all caps, you wrote "boo."
Wait,
dumb.
did you just say you sent it to Parker and your brother?
I said my brother. I said Parker, my brother.
And
Comma.
there was an "and" in there.
You know what? He has multiple personalities. You know.
Okay.
I mean, he doesn't
Well,
actually. He acts like
Look,
it, maybe.
I didn't know if there were some life choices that maybe Lauren had made that you hadn't told me about.
No, nothing like that. Anyway, so he responded, "Boo, dumb, awful, terrible. I'm using
That's the
it."
appropriate response.
With "I'm using it."
No, it is Parker.
That's how he ended it.
Yeah.
I think that is objectively a hilarious joke. But if you don't want to use that for the cold open,
I mean, on one hand, I feel like we kind of have to.
yeah, I could do this as well. I just taught the death of Julius Caesar
Okay.
to my 6th grade students, and so I like to play it up, to keep it interesting. So I talk about how he's walking around the forum, he's acting like a king, even though he doesn't actually have all the powers of a king.
Well, we don't necessarily know that it was exactly the forum. That's
It's
where
the
we
Senate
think that it's
building.
most likely.
Right, he's
But
walking
we
around
don't
that
actually
Senate
know the
building.
exact location.
But he's like walking around. He's like, "Oh look, it's my friend Brutus. Hey Brutus, hey, what's with the knife, man? It's like 8 a.m. Lunch already?
Oh,
All
look,
right, yeah.
oh, look, my friend Cassius.
Oh yeah, hey, what's up? There's a
Kato,
lot of
you're
you
here
guys.
too.
Man, you guys all brought knives. That's crazy." Anyway, starts getting stabbed. Right, they're attacking him, and I talk about how Shakespeare wrote the play Julius Caesar, and in Shakespeare's play, Caesar's final words are "et tu, Brute," or
Yes. You too,
even
Brutus.
even you, Brutus, or and you, Brutus, depending on how you want to translate "et."
Yeah.
And you get to that part, my 6th grade students are like, "Wow." They're like, "I don't even know who Shakespeare is because I'm 11, but wow." Right. And then I'm like, however, Shakespeare, he's writing a play, he's trying to be dramatic. Those certainly were not his last words.
No.
But we have a pretty good idea of what his last words were. And they were probably something like, yeah, exactly.
I mean, he was stabbed, what, like 40-something times?
I think it was 27. I think
Okay.
it's supposed to be 27. Let me see.
That's still quite a lot.
It's an inordinate amount of times to be stabbed.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I just Googled how many times, and the first thing is, has Kenny died?
Well,
And
I
then
mean,
has
priorities.
Right. And then has Goku died? Was 50 Cent shot?
That's actually a good question.
Okay, well,
What
now we're
is
looking
the
up
number
that.
on that?
9 times in a drive-by
Wow.
shooting. Crazy. All right, anyway, back to Julius Caesar. How many times was Julius stabbed? 23. Okay.
23
23 times.
Yeah. So the thing that I mean, that I find funny about this brutal killing.
As
Brutal
all
killing. Get
brutal
it?
as all killings are, hilarious.
Yeah. I wonder if that's where the etymology of the word brutal came from.
Oh, that's a great question. Let me look that up while you're talking.
But I seem to remember, I think it's my parents that told me this story, but I'm fairly certain that there is like a healthy amount of debate around where Julius Caesar actually was stabbed.
Mm-hmm.
So when my parents, when they were like before I was born, when they were still married, they went to Italy together, and they went to Rome, and it was like 14 different places that they went to were like, and this is where Julius Caesar was stabbed. It's just like everyone was like, oh yeah, this is where it happened.
Jeez. Okay, so I got it. It does, but indirectly.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So originally, Brutus meant heavy or dull.
Okay.
And by medieval times, it had become dull or stupid.
Okay.
And it had also
Like a brute.
Right, yeah. And so in the medieval Latin, it turned into Brutus into Brutalis. And English adopted it as brute, and then that it turned into brutal. So you are a brute, you're someone who's dull and stupid. And then brutal, specifically relating to the lower animals in the late 15th century.
Okay, so it's more like the name Brutus and the word brutal come from the same origin, but it's not that the word brutal stems from Brutus.
No, it does. It does. So it's Brutus, the name Brutus meant heavy or dull.
Right. But that meant that at the time of the Brutus,
yes. Yes.
I forget what his last name is, but
yeah. The original 4680, 4380, whatever, or BC.
And then BC. I think 44.
Yeah, 44. You're right.
Yeah.
And then by medieval times, they still had the word Brutus, but it had become a different meaning slightly. And then as the French and English each adopted their own version of that, it became brutalis. And then they started seeing it as dull and stupid, specifically when it got to like low-level animals, the stupid animals. Right. And then I think we just associated with, the stupid animals are brutal and they kill things brutally. I think it just evolved like that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Speaking of crazy Latin terms, let's talk about the Speaker of the House, Congress, and all their stupid Latin terms.
That? Okay.
Have you read the Constitution? How many Latin terms are in there? Like a lot.
I can't think of a single one. I mean, President pro tempore.
Pro tempore. Latin.
Anyway, welcome to Agreeable Disagreements. It is a podcast where two friends from differing political ideologies come together and debate topics from the week's politics. I'm Andrew. This is Cameron. And as you said, our first topic is the Speaker of the House, which I mentioned before we started recording. I have some opinions about.
We've got. So first of all, we've been kind of holding off. We talked about it a little bit, I think, in the last episode, but we went 22 days without a Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
And it was the first time in U.S. history that a Speaker of the House had been ousted, not even by his own party, just had been removed.
Just the first time ever.
And totally it was by his own party.
Yep.
And then, now...
Well, so
we have another one.
Here's what I meant to look this up beforehand. How many votes did we go through this time? Because with Kevin McCarthy, I think they went through 14.
Oh boy,
14 or 15 votes. But that was strictly just for Kevin McCarthy. We had I don't know, 3 different people. I know Jim Jordan initially was the favorite, and then I feel like it was the other guy that I think looks like a Keebler elf. I can't remember. I can't remember what his name is.
Oh my gosh.
And then we have, I always forget the actual guys. Mike Johnson, is that who it is?
Yeah, Mike Johnson. Which let's just be honest,
one.
that is possibly the whitest name
I think
could have.
But I think it's appropriate because from what I know, he is the whitest person you could possibly have.
Oh my gosh. I'm just trying to look up how many elections there have been for Speaker of the House since McCarthy was ousted. I'm not, it's harder to find it, probably because of my wording. 15. No, that was McCarthy. That was McCarthy. Never mind.
That was McCarthy. Okay.
Come on, why can't this just be easy thing to Google?
Okay, so I didn't find that answer, but I did find that there were 7 people attempting to become the speaker.
Jeez.
Anyway, I've been hearing a lot of people bringing up a point that I'm conflicted on.
Mm-hmm.
If the party that is, electing the speaker, even though the whole House votes on it, so really it's everybody. But if the party, the majority party, who really is doing the electing,
sure,
because I think speaker just needs to pass by majority, right?
Correct. Yeah, so you could have a majority Republican House with a Democrat speaker,
right?
In theory,
right. But typically it does not work that way.
Right. I don't think it ever has.
Well, yeah. I've been hearing a lot of people saying that if the majority party can't, for lack of a better term, get their shit together and elect somebody, they should have like a limited number of attempts before the other party gets to decide. And I don't know whether or not I think that would be reasonable. I think it's very easy for me to say right now because my party is in the very, very minor minority.
Yeah, I think it's like 220 to 209, something like that.
Yeah, it's real close.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I get what you're saying, and that there needs to be a line drawn somewhere for there to get this figured out. But at the same time, I mean, if the Republican or the majority, if the majority party can't get it figured out, the minority gets to decide. I don't know. I don't know about that. That seems undemocratic.
I mean, I don't think it does because what it does is there are very few things that incentivize Congress to actually do their job. Elections and the fact that they might, lose an election if they're ineffective is one thing. But I think we're seeing more and more that's because people aren't paying attention. It's very easy for them to threaten a government shutdown. And I can safely say the majority of the Republican incumbents are going to get reelected, even though they're responsible for almost like bringing our government to be, to a halting stop.
I think. Sorry, go ahead, finish. I'm sorry.
I just think that you get 3 tries at this. And if you guys can't get it figured out within those 3 tries, you got to hand it off to someone else.
I think if we had more than a 3-party or 2-party system, that would work more.
Well, I think that's likely. Exactly why we're in this situation, is because the Republican Party is so fractured that we kind of, like you and I have been talking about, we kind of do have 3 parties.
Yeah, but they're all voting for one, right? Whereas if you had the far right in their own separate party, then you had the more standard Republican Party, or more general, I guess, more representationary. I don't know if that's even a word. The
Yeah.
more typical Republican Party as two separate parties, then they wouldn't be voting necessarily on the same person, and you wouldn't have to worry about it as much. I mean, yeah, it would split the
Well,
votes down a little
they
bit
weren't
more.
voting on the same person. That was why it took them so long.
Yeah, so I really quick, I did find an answer. He was elected on the fourth ballot, so just four.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, but
Jim Jordan lost the first 3 times, because I know he lost.
He wasn't the only person that ran. There was Jim Jordan. There was another guy who, you're right, looks like a Keebler elf.
Yeah.
Let me see, because there's a hyperlink here. I could see what you're saying as a if we had more than 2 parties, I think it could work better. But I feel like what you're saying is ignoring the fact that the Democrats do currently vote on the majority,
Right.
on the Speaker of the House.
That's part of why I'm conflicted.
Yeah, I feel like
it's not as if the
good.
Oh, it's not as if the Democrats weren't also voting. It's just they all voted against,
right.
The people that had a chance of winning because they're in the minority.
Sure, and I feel like if the Democrats weren't voting for Speaker of the House and the majority party alone voted, then sure, I'd be more open to having you guys have this many tries to figure it out, and then you also get to have the Democrats voting.
Right. But then also, how is that functionally really any different than how it goes? Like, there is the potential for that to be different, because you could have, Democrats who do side with the Republicans and, potentially vote for it. But is that, reasonable to expect that would even happen? I think, it's less and less every year.
Yeah, but at the same time, I guess the way I would see it is if, let's say, Republicans only allowed to vote on the majority party when they're the majority. If they can't get it figured out, Democrats have to vote on the Republican ballot, maybe. And if that can't get figured out, then bring in Democrat candidates from the minority party.
Well, but then you would just have a coordinated effort by the minority party to have a hung election, basically be like, oh, we can't figure it out, so guess we got to go with the Democratic candidates.
That's
so I feel
true.
Like it would just you'd basically just be cutting out the middleman.
So then the solutions, there's 2 solutions here. One is to do what we're already doing, where any party can run a speaker, or to only allow the speaker to come from the majority party, and everybody has to vote for someone from the majority party. In which case, I think you would see a higher number of moderates and a higher number of people willing to work across the aisle. But I also think you would see a lot more political espionage, where they're like, okay, we have this guy who's not really a Republican, but he says he's a Republican.
Right. But that is how I think you bridge that party gap, and how you encourage bipartisan cooperation. I actually like that idea. I mean, obviously, I don't think that would have been a favorable outcome for me, but I think at least would be better than Mike Johnson, because Mike Johnson, I have some opinions.
Before we get to your opinions, I just want to think, there's got to be a reason why we don't do that, right? Because there's no way that 2 30-year-olds are coming up with an idea that the founding fathers didn't think of. The 2 30-year-olds in like a 10-minute conversation haven't figured out something that they spent literal years trying to figure out.
Because the people with the ability to change it are the people that benefit from the way the system's run as it is.
Okay, so
they would want to change it in a year where it doesn't benefit them, and they're not in the majority and not in power. But as soon as they get to it, they want to maintain the status quo.
Sure, well, that's why we're not changing it now, but why wasn't it originally? like this, right? What is the flaw that stopped them from making that the system in the first place, where
I mean,
speaker has to come from
two
the majority party?
30-year-olds, two 30-year-olds right now know that slavery is immoral and not right, and yet,
Most of the founders did too. I mean, that's the whole reason the three-fifths
uh,
compromise exists.
yeah, but they still allowed the 3/5 compromise.
That's true.
That's the problem.
Reluctantly, I mean,
Thinking that was a compromise is
I
the
agree,
issue.
but historically speaking, we have to put ourselves in their perspective, and their choice was let this entire country crumble apart or put in a promise of progress for the
Right. It was
future.
politically expedient. I think the
Yeah.
same explanation, it's. I don't like drawing a comparison between slavery and how we pick the speaker.
Then why did you
But
do it?
because I was just it was an ad absurdum
Okay.
argument.
Anyway, keep going. Keep going.
But I mean, I think it is. This is why I have such an issue with constitutional originalists, is because the founding fathers were absolutely fallible. That's
Sure.
why they wrote one of the shortest constitutions in history and one of the
Right.
vaguest constitutions in history, is because they understood that it needed to be a living document.
That's fair. I think that's fair. Holy cow! Yeah, it's only 4 pages. Okay, but they're big pages.
Okay, but it's very short.
Yeah, big pages, small print. Anyway, back to Mike Johnson, the most
Mike Johnson.
white-sounding name ever.
We just say whitest person.
Okay, you've got some opinions. Let's hear your opinions.
I think he's a bigot.
Okay.
He has made a career out of pushing fundamental Christian values on people who do not share those values. He made a statement in 2003 about how homosexuality is inherently unnatural, which is what led me to looking up how many species of animals we've observed homosexuality in, and it's around 1,500. So I think just scientifically he's wrong there. Even like, I always love it when people use the misnomer that ducks mate for life and that they're, heterosexual. Ducks do not mate for life, and they have homosexual relationships all the time. Now, just scientifically speaking, there aren't that many animals that we've observed a permanent, like a sexual orientation change.
Sure. So it's more like homosexual instances.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But sheep, which I was telling you about earlier, sheep are one animal where about 10% of rams have been found to be to have a sexual orientation or have a homosexual sexual orientation.
So, man. So I'm thinking about my first thought here, and we could go into this on another episode. My first thought, my only counter to that would be, I don't like comparing ourselves to other animals too much, because
I'm just talking
we
about
clearly have a
his
higher
comment
level of intelligence than other animals.
Right, but to say that it's unnatural, I think means that that there is something inherently unnatural is really the only word that you can use. And when people talk about unnatural versus natural, I think they go back to a more primitive example. And when you look at more primitive things that animals that are just going off of instinct, you find tons and tons of examples of homosexuality.
Sure. And, even if you are to compare specifically animals that do have higher levels of intelligence, you're still going to find those same instances that are being observed. So I'm not saying it's like a bad comparison. I just find it's hard for me to be like, oh, look at penguins and sheep and ducks, and I'm like, their brains are this small and pretty smooth.
Right, but then I also think that speaks to these people who have concerns about books being read to children that will cause them to turn gay when A, that's not how that happens, and B, it's not as if that were not already going to happen. Now, there is some, I'm not trying to get into like a nature versus nurture debate because that is still very much a debate, but basically it shouldn't matter, you know.
I agree that it shouldn't matter, and I'm not gonna sit here and say that I know everything about being gay because I'm not. But
You don't say.
honey, right?
I thought you were the world's foremost expert.
Right, yeah, some white guy in Indiana. Anyway,
A Mormon living in Indiana. You're telling me you're not the world's foremost historian on the LGBTQIA plus community.
no, in fact, I'll remind you, on censorship in communist Poland. But anyway, so I had a thought while you were talking. And so if we're going to make and I don't want to focus on this. This might be a topic for a future episode. But I just had a thought for the first time. Like, we always see people comparing us to animals and saying, look, I mean, it's clearly occurring in nature. But as you said, it's not very common for animals to be exclusively homosexual in nature. Most of the time, it's isolated instances or certain things.
I would argue it's not super common for humans to be exclusively homosexual.
That's fair. But what I'm trying to argue is, what I'm trying to say is, you could make the argument, and I'm not going to say that I believe this, but you could make the argument then that animals behaving in homosexual ways are making a choice. And I'm surprised that we don't see more people on the right use that as an example to say, see, it is a lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
If it's occurring in nature as a choice, then it is a lifestyle choice. Again, not saying I believe that, but that is an argument that I am surprised has not been made.
I get what you're saying.
Or at least very often.
I agree that I'm surprised that we don't see more people saying that. However, I do think it's an asinine argument.
I think they're both asinine arguments. We're not the same level as penguins and ducks and sheep.
Exactly. I'm just referring to his statement that it's inherently unnatural.
Sure.
Now,
sure.
He's done a lot of other things that I don't agree with and I think are abhorrent. One of them is that he tried to use sodomy laws to straight up criminalize homosexuality, not just gay marriage, but homosexuality. And that's persecution. That's, I think, totally wrong to try and dictate what two people are doing when it doesn't affect anyone else.
Right.
And I think it just speaks to, I mean, he also was like the head of this Alliance for the Defense of Freedom, I think it was called, or something, some acronym like that, which basically was just a legal organization that went after the LGBTQIA community's rights. And that seems to be the only thing that he's really, like, the only focus of his career in politics and in law. One interesting thing, though, that I found was on his Wikipedia page,
which I'm looking at right now.
Yeah, so he has a voice sample there. And when you click on that, it's him arguing against the Endangered Species Act.
Hold on, I'm going to listen to it while you're talking.
Yeah, it's. I mean, he's talking about how it's going to hurt farmers and stuff, and how like the liberal agenda is to hurt farmers by adding more and more species to the Endangered Species Act.
Oh my goodness.
But as somebody who, went into college wanting to study wildlife conservation
and then ended up studying food, so you went to study conserving these animals and then ended up studying eating them.
That's true, but both were in the agricultural college.
Fair. I just think it's funny. Keep going.
Yeah, but there are very few defenses that I can think of for not supporting the Endangered Species Act, especially when we've seen an exponential growth in the number of extinctions within recent history. We are on the verge of a mass extinction event where we will lose a significant portion of our biodiversity. I mean, I love a good steak. I can't imagine ever willingly being a vegetarian, but if it did save, endangered species from going extinct,
sure.
Which it's one thing to say, why should we care about this one species? But there are things like keystone species and indicator species where, in the case of like keystone species, if you take that species out of a population, the entire ecosystem collapses.
Like the wolves in Yellowstone.
Yes, or I think salmon is another one because salmon provides so much food for different species. In the case of the wolves kill the deer, which eat the resources for other animals. So if you don't have the wolves, there's too many deer. They eat everything in sight, and there's nothing left for all the other species. So your badgers, your golden mantle ground squirrel. I don't know. They
I'm going to look that up now. Golden mantle ground squirrel. Keep going.
A golden mantle. It's a lot of people. It's like the classic image that people think of when they think of a chipmunk, but it's actually not a chipmunk. It's a squirrel. It's like Chippendale Rescue Rangers type of chipmunk, but it's a squirrel.
I'm not going to lie. That kind of pisses me off. I've been lied to my entire life.
I told you. I studied fisheries and wildlife.
You can burn in hell, man. You just ruined my day.
Probably will.
At least they have working heat down there.
Yeah.
Anyway, keep going.
But he's an anti-vaxxer.
Is he? I'm not seeing that. Keep going. I'm going to look for that.
I thought I saw he was. He was an election denier.
What did I just do? Okay.
He also thinks that he subscribed, and this doesn't surprise me because of his fundamental religious background, but he subscribes to the idea that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, which is obviously not true. And just everything about him screams, I'm going to use my religion as a blunt force object. And that even if I agreed with his ideas, I can't get behind that.
So I'm not seeing anything about him being anti-vax, but he did oppose vaccine mandates.
Okay.
Which is different, right?
It's different, but it doesn't... I don't think it convinces me that he's not anti-vax.
I mean, I love me a good vaccination, but I'm not for vaccine mandates, right? I feel like there's a difference between saying, here is this technology, it works really well, it will keep you and people around you from getting sick, and we should encourage everybody to do it. But then to say, if you show up to this baseball game and you're not vaccinated, you have to sit on that part of the baseball field, which is something Eugene did for their minor league baseball team.
Yeah. You can still go to the baseball game.
But it's segregated, and they're not the good seats.
Segregation based on your choice.
Okay.
If you want to drink alcohol, you have to sit in this section.
So what if you're someone whose religion is against vaccinations, right? Like some Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, I think when your religion butts up against public health and safety, your religion can... I'm not going to finish that sentence.
I don't know. I think we need to be a little bit more open to the liberty side of that. On one hand, because I
think when real people are dying by the thousands, I think that your religion takes backseat.
I'm with you until you say your religion takes a backseat. I don't think your religion should have to take a backseat in any case, but
personally, I think your religion should require you to do what is best for the good of your fellow man.
Well, and let's that's fair, but definition of
You
what's
cut
good for the
out.
right.
I didn't.
Oh, I said that's fair, but let's be clear that what's good for your fellow man is subjective, right? Because one
Yeah,
side
but
might
this wasn't
say,
subjective.
hold up, it is,
This
because
had a
one
lot of
side,
evidence behind it, proving that it was the appropriate thing to do to protect people from harm.
now hold on, let me finish. So you've got one side where you would say getting vaccinated is going to help, and it's a very viable argument, as you're pointing out, rightly so, that being vaccinated against, let's say, specifically COVID, is going to help a lot of people around you stay healthy, stay happy, live long, full lives.
Mm-hmm.
But the other side isn't arguing that we shouldn't have vaccinations at all. It's saying we should have choice. And by taking away choice, you're long term causing more harm to more people. And I'm not going to say which
I
one of those
disagree with
sides
that.
is. I see both
I
arguments.
think that I get what you're saying, but I think that the reason why the mandate was necessary because people were choosing to act against the health of the community, which is why we have mandates to unfortunately force people who don't want to do something that is necessary and vital.
Okay.
And I don't think that the vaccine mandates would have been in place had it not been necessary and vital.
Here's my problem with that is that, and granted, this is hindsight is 2020, pun
Yeah.
not intended, but looking at U.S. death statistics, 2020 there were 350,831 COVID deaths, according
Right.
to the CDC.
Okay.
And in that same year, the flu had
That's
25,000. Now, granted, that is lower. It's significantly lower. It's a tenth as
yes,
much.
but we also know how to treat the flu. The flu is not a novel virus.
Right. And so if we look at COVID deaths this year, right? Because at this point, we know more how to treat COVID.
Yeah, with vaccines.
Again, I'm not against vaccines. I am fully vaccinated, even
I know,
against
but
COVID.
I think more what I'm saying is that if not your argument, I'm using the metaphorical
The general you. Yeah.
Yeah. If your argument against taking the vaccine is because someone told you to and you don't wanna, grow up.
See, but I think it's a bigger argument than that. For them, it's not, I told you to, and you told me to, and now I don't wanna. It's, you told me I have to, and that I don't have a choice, and now I'm going to say I have a choice. Right? Because here, for
But if you
example,
had made that choice before you were told to, it wouldn't have been a problem. If you were a decent person who understood the science and took the time to protect yourself and others and took it seriously, this wouldn't have happened. The only people complaining are the people who...
Go ahead. The only people complaining are the people who?
Are the people who were not acting with the best interest of the people around them.
Okay, so replace the word vaccination in this argument with pregnancy, right? If you had made the choice earlier to use protection, now granted, there are certain extenuating circumstances that we're not counting in this because they do make up for the minority of abortions.
No, because getting pregnant doesn't put my health, you getting pregnant doesn't put my health at risk.
Okay, but if we're going to make the argument of my body, my choice...
Actually, if it's your child, I might take that back. That might put my health at risk one day.
Okay, but if we're going to make the argument my body, my choice, then we have to apply that to all bodies.
No, we don't. Not when they're such different circumstances. The choice to either have or not have a pregnancy affects one person's health. Now, there are some people who would argue that it affects two people's health, but those people don't have the science behind them. But fundamentally, it affects one person's health. The choice to not get vaccinated affects I don't even know how many people's health. I don't think that it's measurable because it's an exponential growth. You pass it on to 3 people, they pass it on to 3 people, and then 3 more people, and it's a logarithmic scale. So I don't think that's a fair comparison to say that this is a my body, my choice thing, because it's also not just your body. It is the body of everyone else around you.
Okay, but the other problem is, and this is what I was hinting at earlier with hindsight is 2020, is these vaccines weren't nearly as effective as we thought they would be, right? I mean, we started out thinking, oh, this is going to be a one-time vaccine, but now you have to get 1, 2, 3 boosters a year.
Yeah, because we didn't know how fast it was going to mutate.
It's not just about the mutations. It's also that the vaccine itself loses efficacy and wasn't as effective as we thought it was. I mean,
Sure.
University of Minnesota shows that the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine was only 33% effective when we were when we were being told it was 90.
Because here's the thing. Scientific information has to be allowed to learn from itself.
I agree.
It's once you get new information, then the science changes. And I do think that's a reason why people were so resistant, is because even doctors were hearing new things every single day. But that is the sign of good science. When you receive new information and you change your opinion.
I agree with that. And that's why, so I did get vaccinated, but I didn't rush out to get it because I wanted to be the wait and see. I'm already a homebody. I already limit how much I talk to people in person as much as possible.
I mean, I waited too because I wasn't going anywhere. So I was like, I'm not gonna.
But at the same time, right, we were being told by our church leadership, who, by the way, the current president prophet of our church is a former heart surgeon, medical professional, like pioneered technologies that are still being used in bypass surgery today.
Okay.
And he came out the second that these vaccines were made available and said, I just got mine. You should go get yours.
Oh, thank God. I thought you were going the other way.
No, He said, all the church leadership is behind it. We've all looked at it as a medical professional. I have researched the science behind it, and I see what they're saying. I see, and then as a religious leader, having prayed about it, I think it's fine. Like, so we were encouraged within our church to go get it. Yeah, so for me, it wasn't that I didn't go out and immediately get it, not because I wasn't being encouraged to, but because as someone who studies a lot of history, I wanted to wait and see. Because there's a lot of instances where the government has said, do this, do this, do this, do this, and it has not gone well.
Sure, but there's a lot of instances where the government has said, do this, and it has gone well. Polio. Smallpox.
Okay, but those weren't mandated, were they?
I mean, I think polio, you could count that as a mandate. Everyone had to get it. It's just there was no one fighting against it. That's the thing is that nobody has been able to. Nobody that I've heard has had a legitimate argument for not getting a vaccine that doesn't. Or that relies on science.
So here's the thing. A lot of these vaccine mandates that we currently have are not you have to get it or else. It's you have to get it if you want to use some specific public things, like public schools, where you're going to be around small children who are at risk. And I get that because it's a government funded, you want to use the government thing, here's the government's rules. And that's where things like the polio virus vaccine come into play. But I could even say a private venue has the right to determine whether or not they allow people to come in with or without masks, with or without vaccines.
Eugene Emeralds are a private venue.
And that's true, but that doesn't mean I think it's right to do. I think they have the right, but I don't think it is right.
But you do get that it's not segregation the same way that racial segregation is, because people of a different race don't have the option to change the color of their skin.
Right, but
the people that were refusing the vaccine were also wrong.
See, but the only thing I would say is some people who have religious oppositions to vaccinations, you could argue,
sure, but
they don't have they also don't have that choice.
Enjoy your martyrdom because you have sacrificed so much for your religion.
And you know what? I mean, again, that's not my religion, but I try and be as open about religion and beliefs as I can. And
I do too, but it's, I mean, again, it's when you're using that to refute scientifically backed, tested, not foolproof, but at least with sufficient evidence, when you're using it to deny that kind of thing that will save lives, then I question A, what the tenets of your religion are, and B, what your intentions are, just as a person and a
yeah,
follower of that religion.
I
My
see
religion
that, but
commands me to help those around me, and if I can do that by just getting a shot with, and even if I disagree with the political regime that is in place, I mean, it's not. I don't think that's an appropriate way to protest or to show your distance. Because real people died.
right. And I my only concern, as I mentioned, is less about I have concerns for the deaths of others and for the health of others, but I also have concern for liberty and freedoms because historically speaking, it has never been a brand new government jumps in, all your rights are gone. It has started out with a little bit here and there that seem harmless, that seem like it's not going to be a problem, that turns into a
Mm,
steamroller. And that steamroller then sucks up all of your rights as you go along.
yeah,
And so for me, I really am I'm always on the side of agency, choice, and liberty in the sense that what option provides the most amount of people the most amount of choices. And you could
mhm,
easily make the argument that everyone being vaccinated allows more people to live and therefore have more choices. But you could
yeah.
also make the argument that by taking away this choice and allowing the government to tell you what you have to do to your body gives them a precedent to do worse things in the future. And for me
I think
it's about preventing that precedent. It's about preventing bad things not from happening now, but from happening down the line. We don't know what those unintended consequences might be.
it's less about here's what you are and aren't allowed to do to your own body, and more about here's what you aren't allowed to do to other people's bodies.
And I can see that argument, right? I'm not going to say I can't. I think that's a fair counter argument.
Just just to uh, just to bring it back though to what you were saying about um, it's never a new government that comes in and suddenly everything changes. It's a slow rollover.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the appointing of Mike Johnson to the speaker's chair is another symptom of that exact same thing.
I think you could argue that, yeah.
I think based on the number of anti-LGBT laws that he's supported, the laws that against women's right to health, laws about what his support of what books to ban and or what books to allow. I think you are seeing a fundamental, or not a fun, but a systematic rolling back of certain rights for a specific group of people, which I believe, at least according to the, I think it's the Yad Vashem Museum, which is the Holocaust Museum. I believe that is one of the tenets of fascism.
Um, so it depends on what you define as fascist. When you get
Well,
into
I'm
these,
using the list that they have in the Holocaust Museum. I think
right,
the Shoah Foundation is another one. Um,
my only issue is I've looked at those definitions and I think they're a little narrow, if that makes
I
sense.
think that we're pretty close to them.
No, I'm not saying that they're bad definitions. I'm saying that they're hyper focused on specifically what Nazism looked like or what Italian fascism looked like, and I'm saying fascism
Yeah, but
has expanded to include a wider range of things.
yes, but um, I think, well, is that to say that that it truly has expanded, or that it's being used in the vernacular to refer to things that aren't necessarily
I think
fascism?
both.
Because I would agree with that.
I think both are true, right? I think so. Fascism at its core is hypernationalism, right? And
Yes.
and that has traditionally been associated with things like race
Mm-hmm.
or culture. But we're starting to
I think
see
ethnicity, because
ethnicity.
ethnicity
That's
kind
the
of,
better word. That's the better word.
yeah, yeah.
But I think we're starting to see it used in the vernacular more and more improperly
Mm-hmm.
on both sides. More so on the left because the left is shouting fascism at every little thing.
Well, because I think we are dangerously close to diverting from capitalism into fascism.
I don't think we are, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. But I think we also are seeing fascism can be applied not just to race and ethnicities, but also to ideologies. And we're starting to see fascism
Sure.
applied more to political parties. We're starting to see fascism applied more to um, even religion or belief systems. I think that when we think of it in the terms of hypernationalism, nationalism at its core often is mistaken as simply being not eccentric, excessive patriotism. And
Uh-huh.
that's traditionally what it was. But I think it's more now, it's more focused on having an us versus them, where the us are the good guys and the them are the bad guys who are ruining everything. And when you look at it from that perspective, you can see this kind of nationalism or hypernationalism in a number of places. Think of how many Republicans say the Democrats are terrible, they're ruining everything. But also, how many Democrats are saying the Republicans are stupid, awful, and are ruining everything, and we need to stop them from being in power? I think when we think of it through this sense or this lens of political party fascism, where the
Mm.
nationalism us versus them conflict is political party lines, I think you're right. We are dangerously close to a fascist sort of regime, but I think it could fall on either side. If either side were
See,
to get
I
complete
don't buy
power
that
right
either.
now and we're given the power to squash out all opposition, I think both sides would jump at that opportunity.
See, I think that comes from a fundamental lack of the steps that it takes to go into fascism, which, just briefly, I want to go over what those are. This is from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. So, the first one, strident, often exclusionary nationalism, which you said. I see one party displaying that. Uh, fixation with national decline, either real or perceived, and threats to the existence of the national community. I think you see much more the right talking about how this is going to destroy America.
Really quick, in the chat, can you send me a link to this? Because I'm having
Yes,
trouble
yeah,
finding the
absolutely.
exact one that you're seeing.
Give it 1 second.
I just want to make sure I'm following along, is
Yeah.
all.
All right, there you go.
Okay. Okay, keep going.
Embrace of paramilitarism. Proud Boys, I think, are a perfect example of that. The militia movement within the far right, perfect example of that. Pro- Protecting or elevating the rights of the national community above the rights of those seen as alien. So that's the obsession with the border and the just, I mean, blatant racism, I think. And again, which party is that more prone to be reminiscent of? Removing obstacles to national unity, suppressing those seen as challenging it. I might say that both parties do that. Expanding the size and influence of the national state. I don't know that that one necessarily applies. I do think that possibly that could speak to, in the past, certain the Republican Party being more gung ho to go to war. But again, I don't really know that that one applies at this point. often seeking to expand territory through armed conflict. We're not really choosing to do that. But out of those, and this isn't even all of them, because I think there's like 13 steps in total. But out of those 7, you have 4 that are eerily reminiscent of very common things that we see from one specific party.
So I would say, here's my counterpoints. Strident, often exclusionary nationalism. I see that on both political parties because the left.
Who on the left is using national identity to exclude others?
Are you kidding me? Watch any MSNBC, any MSNBC broadcast, and they talk about how Republican values are un-American. It's rhetoric used by both sides to call the others un-American. It's totally being done.
But they're not saying that Republicans aren't American and therefore they don't count, because that's not.
I'm not seeing that from the Republicans either, though.
Yes, you are. When you the birther movement, saying that Obama was born in Kenya and therefore he shouldn't be president, which is A, a lie, and B, a stupid thing to.
But that's not exclusionary nationalism.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not. So exclusionary nationalism is where you look at a group of people who are currently citizens, who currently hold citizenship, and say they should not hold citizenship for these specific reasons. They should be denied citizenship for these specific reasons. The birther movement was not trying to deny President Obama's citizenship that he currently had.
Yes, it was. It was denying he had citizenship at all. But to your
denying
point,
he was a naturalized citizen, which is a different story.
Point, no, he's not a naturalized citizen. He is a citizen.
There's a difference.
He was born in Hawaii.
I know. I'm not saying I don't believe it. I'm not saying that. A naturalized citizen is someone who is born a citizen. A citizen can be a naturalized citizen or someone who gains citizenship as an immigrant.
No, I think you have that backwards. I think a naturalized citizen. Yeah, I think a naturalized citizen is a citizen who has become a citizen afterwards.
You're right. I do have it backwards. Okay. So, I do have it backwards. I apologize. But anyway, you're saying, to my point.
Come
on, man! You were hyping me up.
I know. I'm sorry. I forgot. I think I feel like we're getting off topic. We're not going to reach a consensus on this.
You're right. Let me just really quick.
I'm very, very afraid that Mike Johnson is the speaker, and it doesn't surprise me coming from. I remember what I was going to say. To your point about the exclusion of naturalized citizen, there is one party right now who has any debate going on about whether or not naturalized citizens should be citizens, whether birthright citizens should be citizens.
Okay.
And that's the Republican Party. Now, it's mainly one person, Vivek, saying that, but he is not alone within the Republican Party of thinking that. And to my knowledge, the Democratic Party has no one thinking that because it's a stupid thing.
So that's fair. That is fair, but I would point out it is, again, a debate held by a minority of people, and the rest of the Republicans look at those people and are like, no, you're being stupid, and ignore them.
But they are bedfellows.
So hold on. I don't think we're seeing as much exclusionary nationalism as we really should be if we were going to be saying we're on the road to fascism, because we're not seeing anybody calling for a denial of American citizenship to people who currently hold it, right?
No, but you are with human rights, particularly with white nationalism.
Okay, but white nationalism is a vast minority. I don't think embracing
it's as much of a minority as you think it is.
And I don't think that the Proud Boys are as much paramilitarized as you think they are. I mean, have you looked at them? They're not looking like they're ready to fight a war. A lot of them are unhealthily
They look like they're
overweight.
trying to be. That's not the point.
But they're not being embraced.
When I go to rallies and when I go to protests, the people that I am doing that with are not armed.
Sure, but at the same time, the key word there is embrace. Nobody's sitting around going, "Ah, yeah, the Proud Boys." At least no one's sane.
I think they are.
I would
I think a
say
lot of them are.
I would agree with you that fixation with national decline, real or perceived, and threats to the existence of the national community. But I think that goes way back to World War One, if not pre-World War One. That goes back to just American
Sure.
defensiveness, and I think every party has that. And on that point, you also talked about
Can I just say, those are the two that I did not expect you to actually agree with, or to say that, like, you could see that. I thought for sure you would see the nationalism, the exclusionary nationalism. I thought that was
No, I would just say, because
very
I've
clear to
I've seen
everyone.
so many examples in relatively recent history of exclusionary nationalism. Like, you've got the Soviet removal of Georgians, you've got the
I'm not saying we have pogroms. I'm saying that we have
right, but this
us
strident
versus them mentality, which I think is kind of what the core of nationalism is.
yes,
And it's typically being perpetuated by one party against Hispanic people, Black people, people in the LGBTQIA community.
I would argue that you're
and
seeing.
you don't see that on the left.
I would say you're seeing a de jure on the right and a de facto on the left. On the right, you have de jure, meaning yes, you do have some people who are calling for some exclusionary policies, but on the left, we're seeing a lot of these policies that the left has championed and passed that were meant to help minorities has actually ended up keeping them in minority
Yeah.
or in lower things. So I think you're seeing on both sides. It's just one is telling you they're doing it, and one of them is saying we're not doing it, but we really are.
Right.
Now you
At
did
least
mention
being ignorant of it.
right now you did mention something about which party is more likely to go to war. That is wrong. The Democratic Party has started more wars than the Republicans.
Well, that's within what
Within
time span?
all of U.S. history. The Democratic
Yeah,
Party has
that's-
started 7 wars. The Republicans have started 5, one of which was the Civil War to end slavery.
You know as well as I do that at some point, and we can argue about what point in time this was, but you know as well as I do that the Republican and Democratic Party essentially ideologically flipped.
Oh boy, we're gonna have to do that in episode 16. We'll talk about the flip.
I mean, that's why people say the Republican Party is the party of Lincoln.
Oh, I don't want to get into this right now. So,
Yeah.
because it's right, but it's mostly wrong. Anyway, protecting or elevating the rights of a national community above the rights of those seen as alien. I don't think that we're seeing that as much as people would think we are. However,
You have so many Republicans talking about the border. I don't give a shit about the border.
Okay, but at the
I don't
same
know
time-
anyone who legitimately does.
okay, but at the same time, you have the Democratic Party are the ones who built the cages that they talked about for Trump. You have the Democratic Party who is expanding the border fence that Trump started.
They're not the party that started using the cages.
You're right.
though.
They're the ones that started that. They're the ones that built them for that purpose, and then were
No.
yes, they were
For not to keep children
to
in.
keep people in, including children. Yes, that's what they were
I'm
built
not,
for.
I'm not going to defend them, but let's be clear: the one side can do more wrong than the other. Both sides can do wrong, but when we talk about who did really wrong, it was the Republicans who kept the children in the cages.
I think you're talking about starting a race and finishing a race. I think both of them. If it's a bad race, it's a bad race.
Maybe. Yeah.
I'm not going to go through the rest of these, but I feel like you could make the argument that you can always make an argument that we are close to fascism. And I would say, and my second thing I was going to get at was, you could easily, I think you're right, argue that that Mike Johnson being elected as Speaker of the House is another step towards it or another sign of it. I would argue, in the contrary, however, that with the recent history that we can observe, that we've been seeing a rise in more far right movements, not just in the United States but worldwide, globally. Brazil, Poland,
100%.
Europe, most of Europe actually. Britain
In
with
Germany,
Boris Johnson, right?
of all
Germany,
places.
right? But we're also seeing that it's a bell curve and that it's falling, right? Boris Johnson removed, Donald Tusk in Poland being removed. You've got tons and tons and tons of people who were elected in this wave that is now washing away. And it's not going to wash away completely immediately. Think of it like a tide going in and going out. But I think we're kind of over that hill, and the waves are kind of around in different spots around the beach. Some are higher, some are lower, but they're receding.
I think it's more of not a bell curve. I think it's more of a sinusoidal wave.
Now I got to look up that word.
A sine function. It's just it's a bell curve that keeps.
Oh, okay.
I think that what we are seeing is, and we're just seeing a part of it right now, which makes it look like a bell curve. But you see this rise in far right nationalism. And once the public becomes aware of that, you see the pushback against that, people protesting against that. And so it falls back down until people go into a false sense of security. And they're like, okay, we took care of that problem. We don't have to worry about far right nationalism. And then they get emboldened and far right nationalists start to rise up again, and you see a pushback. I think we're just seeing a section of it. And people are finally starting to realize that there are consequences for their far right hateful views.
I would agree with that, except I would argue one of two things is happening. Either the waves are getting bigger or they're getting smaller.
Yeah, the amplitude of it could be changing.
Yeah,
I could probably see that.
I think that in reality it's getting smaller, but the media is trying to make us think it's getting bigger. I think no, because here's the thing: if you look at the media,
I think that people are being more vocal on both sides. The far right is being more vocal. The people pushing back against them are being more vocal. I mean, the George Floyd protests.
Sure, but those were several years ago. When's the last time something that scale has happened?
Well, I think we've become numb as a nation to it, unfortunately.
Have we become numb, or have we started to try and affect change in other ways?
I don't think we've done anything meaningful in the way of change because these things
keyword
keep happening.
Keyword is try.
But we haven't even tried.
I think
we have not tried to reform police
yes, we have
institutions in a way that would be no, because we still have police killing people who they shouldn't be killing.
Just because we have police killing people who they shouldn't be killing doesn't mean that we're not attempting to.
We're the only country in the world that has this problem.
No, we're not. There are countries that are more, granted, I will admit, they're more war-torn countries than we are. But
okay. In context, you know what I mean.
Right. But let's look at Indianapolis. Okay, Indianapolis has a Democratic mayor that was elected relatively around the same time that Trump was elected, kind of in response. Indianapolis is a rather blue city in a historically red state. And one of the first things that mayor did was try and bring in police reforms, right? And to be fair, they did not work. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% clear on what those reforms were, how they affected, but I know that 800 officers in his tenure have quit. I know that crime has skyrocketed here. Now that's more to do with his specific reforms, and I'm not saying that reforms are needed or not needed or anything, but I'm trying to say there are reforms being made on local levels. But we're not going to hear about what every city's doing because a single city isn't going to be a representative for the whole state or for the whole country.
Yeah, but when you look at the incidences nationally, we're seeing the same type of incidences. We're seeing police officers that are still being protected and keeping their jobs because of qualified immunity. But do you want to get on to our second topic?
I think we can hold it. We're almost out of time. We're at an hour and 11 as it is. This is usually where we cut it.
Are we really?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to?
Well, I have one other thing I wanted to say.
Do you want to do a part 2 and talk about the Trump thing because there might be more to the Trump trial later? Because I do want to discuss the political motivations that would that could be around the gag order and how the trial is being handled. But I also don't feel like we have a whole lot of info yet.
Okay, so I would like to see a little bit more info on that. And so maybe let's hold it for the next one or the one after that.
Okay.
Just because I kind of want to see where it goes.
Okay.
And, one other thing I want
to... Maybe we do a bonus ep on that.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe we could do something over the weekend.
Like just a half an hour kind of a thing.
Maybe. Not right now though. I'm getting tired.
No, yeah, no. I'm. This was a tough debate.
Oh man,
I feel like the guns came out with
they
this one.
did. One other thing I wanted to say really quick, because we were talking about the sinusoidal waves. I know I didn't pronounce that correctly, but
I don't think I did either.
two native speakers can't speak their own language. Anyway, so one
Where's
thing.
your nationalism now?
One thing I remember, and I'm not a huge Glenn Beck fan anymore. I was when I was in high school. I know you're not.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say that was the
thing.
Start of our debates.
Yeah, but one of the things that he did talk about back in the day was politics is a pendulum that's swinging, and every time it swings further to one side, it swings further to the other side. And I think we're seeing that at global politics. I think we're seeing that at national politics. But when you look at local and individuals, I think we're seeing it get smaller. I genuinely think and believe, based on my own experiences, that when you look at the media, they make everything seem like it's big because that's got to sell. That's how they sell. It's how they get your attention. But
yeah,
when
I'm
you
not
genuinely,
as distrustful of the media as you are, but
yeah.
I'm still have a healthy amount of skepticism, but I'm not.
But when
I'm not as distrustful.
When you go talk to people, they're not nearly as crazy as you think, right? I mean, I know hundreds of Republicans, and I don't know a single one who genuinely thinks about far right stuff and thinks that the far right people are right. Dude, I lived in Alla freaking Bama, okay?
Yeah.
But still, I worked at a pet store where I worked at a pet store where an old lady literally called a cashier around the corner the N-word, and I was like, we don't use that typically anymore, especially in that context. That is not okay. Why are you doing that? But
yeah,
like I've been around them, but I don't know anybody personally who holds those far right views. I think you would be hard pressed.
We still do have statistics telling us that white nationalism, particularly, and just nationalism in general, but particularly white nationalism, we do know that is on the rise.
Is it on the rise, or are they just closeted?
No, exactly. They were closeted. I don't think that really makes any difference, because
I think
even if they were holding their views, they still had them.
Yeah, but I would see on the rise meaning more and more people are adopting it, whereas closeted means they already adopted those thoughts and now they're just being vocal. Seeing
more outward displays of it.
Okay, I can see what you mean by that.
Is really what I'm speaking to, and we do have the statistics to show that, whether it's political speech and rhetoric from politicians, whether it's what people are saying on social media.
But
the rallies that are being held, it's the way people are voting.
Yeah, but most sane people aren't
metrics.
Most sane people aren't going to go around saying those things. So when you have a rise in things like this that are objectively insane views that are being held by people,
sane is not sane is such a subjective term.
Okay,
though.
Fine. Let's say radical. I want it to be negative about these people who hold these bad views, but
I know, but a lot of them are just quote unquote normal people who are being radicalized.
Okay, but what I'm saying,
and they're being radicalized through these steps that we just talked about.
And I'm not sure that they are. I think it's more like we gave.
But we know they are.
No, I think it's that if you go to a rally and you give the normal people the microphones, most of the normal people are going to say like maybe one thing and then leave. You give the crackhead a microphone, and he's going to babble into it and say some weird crap, man. I think we've just given a lot of people who should not necessarily have access, or who would not normally have access to express their views, more access to express these views in social media. And so
what you're forgetting are the people in the audience that are continuing to listen to those crackheads.
Okay, but I would be listening like, this guy's hilarious because he's crazy. I wouldn't be listening because I think he's right.
Yeah, but if you go to those rallies, sure, there are those people there. I can't say that I would do any different than you would, go to see, back in high school, I would have bought tickets to a Glenn Beck Beck event if I knew like that it wouldn't have provided him with any money, just to hear how asinine he was. I would have loved that. But when you go to these events, when you go to these rallies, my parents had a rally on. They didn't throw the rally. There was a Black Lives Matter protest planned and held at the park, literally across the street from them. And you can look up videos of this protest in the Thurston Hills in 2021, where you have armed protesters on the far right, armed protesters not on the far right, but still on the right. You have I'm not going to say that both sides are not at fault, but there was only one side there that had weapons. There was only one side there that was coming there with the intent to intimidate.
I think that particular issue, and I'm not sure that it's necessarily intent to intimidate. I think it's perceived as that, and I'm sure there is some intent to intimidate from some individuals. One thing I have learned as I've gone from growing up in a very blue state to living and going to college in a very blue state with relatively blue professors to living in a red state with very blue professors, and then here in a red state, I've had a lot of exposure to both sides, and I would be more skeptical to say that it is about intimidation. I think this is more a cultural misunderstanding. I think we have.
I don't. I have carried a gun daily. I've had a concealed handgun license. There is absolutely no reason why I would openly carry a weapon. If I am going to carry a weapon, I'm going to have it concealed.
See, but I'm going to still say that
There's no reason to carry a gun in the open unless to intimidate someone.
I'm still going to say that this is a cultural misunderstanding because I think we have dived so far into this two-party system.
I think you're giving them too much slack.
I think we have dived too far into this two-party system that we are now two separate cultures trying to live within the same culture.
That's absolutely true.
And I think that you have the left that doesn't understand the right's cultural views on arming themselves, and you have the right's cultural views, or you have the right not understanding the left's cultural views that you just, I think, very adequately expressed about whether or not it's appropriate to be armed, when to be armed, where to be armed, things like that. I bet you if you had talked to anybody at that rally who was open carrying, it was less about intimidation and more about exercising their right to show their support for that right. And I know that because I have talked to those people. I am related to those people.
I have not talked to those people specifically, but my stepdad did go out and talk to those people. My mom was terrified and didn't go out. But my stepdad did talk to a few people, and certainly there were people that, they're saying we're going to exercise our rights. But there were also people there saying we brought weapons to show them that you can't mess with us.
But that whole can't mess with us is not intimidation so much as it is showing that we are defending ourselves. I think there's
a show of force.
There's offensive and defensive intimidation, and I think they're very, very, very different things. Defensive intimidation meaning this is our stuff, this is our culture. How dare you attack it? Come at something that's one of our core values. We're not going to back down from it. And offensive intimidation would be more like I dare you, and there is a lot of I dare you. Not gonna lie, there is a lot of I dare you, but it's facetious. There's nothing to back it up when you actually press those people.
Yeah, I'll agree with that, but
it's the punk rock counterculture. The counterculture right now is to be conservative, right? I mean, you look at what the mainstream society culture, what the mainstream accepted culture is, and it's to be different. It's to be, different from what the traditional conservative values are. And so you have these people who are, it's becoming the punk rock thing to distrust the government. It's becoming, well, it always was. It's becoming the punk rock thing to, open carry your guns and show your
punk rocker though would absolutely hate you saying that these people are punk rock.
But what I mean by that is that it's the counterculture, right? It's
a counter to the popular culture,
which is
I'll give you
which
that.
Is what a counterculture is.
I don't I don't think those are necessarily the same.
Okay. Well, we should end this here, I think.
We should agree to disagree.
We should agree to disagree. Roll credits. Oh my gosh. Why don't you give us our outro and our fun fact?
Oh, that's right. I have both. Well,
you have both, yeah.
First of all, thank you to everyone who was listening. Please do us a favor, like, subscribe, share, do all the things to help us reach more people. Thank you to Halcyon Club for letting us use their song "This Life Is Tough But Fair" from their EP Headset Emotions. And our fun fact today is actually one I found while going on a Wikipedia rabbit hole after looking up our new speaker, and that's that scientists have found that about 10% of rams, so male sheep, have found to change their sexuality to have a homosexual sexual orientation. But they've never observed it in female sheep or ewes, and the reason is because when female sheep are ready to mate, they just stand still. So there's nothing that they can do to like instigate that with another female sheep. So they just, if you had a sheep or a field of lesbian sheep, they would all just stand still.
That's what I'm gonna do now. Next time I want to like
just stand still.
Yeah. Next time I'll be like, I'm not. Hey, Alyssa, you in the mood? I'm just gonna stand there.
We don't need to go into your courting.
That's all I'm gonna say. I'm just gonna stand there.
Your wife.
Just gonna stand there.
Yeah. What do you think?
It's like the naked man in How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, which is, I think, by today's standards, probably sexual assault.
I would agree. I think so.
Yeah. I'd be pretty upset.
Make sure to tune into our next episode because we've decided that every 5 episodes we're going to mix it up, and so
yes,
the next episode is our 15th, which means that we are going to be talking about conspiracy theories.
Yes,
it's going to be
both
exciting.
Ones that we believe in, ones that are absolutely proven to be false, ones that are actually true.
It's going to be great.
There's going to be a good eclectic bunch there.
And I want you to know right now that the aliens have probed me.
Yes. That's why you're only saying the waist down.
Right. Yeah. Him. I am currently...
And me, but they haven't gotten to me yet.
I am currently being probed. Yeah.
Yeah.
As we speak.
We need to... Let's end it.
That's really weird.